The room was dark, silent, and heavy with the smell of sweat. A single light flickered in the corner. David Goggins stood in front of the mirror, staring at his own reflection. His eyes looked tired, his body was heavy, and his mind was filled with noise. He hated what he saw. Years of pain, excuses, and broken promises stared back at him. He whispered to himself, "This is not me." That night, it wasn't just another bad day, it was a breaking point. He felt like the world had beaten him down. Every dream he ever had was buried under a mountain of fear, doubt, and comfort. He had become a man who gave up too easily, and he knew it. As he looked into the mirror, the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. He was his own worst enemy. No one else was stopping him. It was him, every single day, choosing the easy path, the comfortable route. He slammed his fist against the wall, not out of anger at the world, but out of pure frustration with himself. Tears mixed with sweat as they streamed down his face. The man who once thought he was strong had finally realized the truth. He had been weak for far too long. But then, in that moment of absolute despair, something inside him shifted. It was small, like a tiny spark in the dark. A voice whispered in the back of his mind, "What if this is not the end? What if 2025 could be different?" He didn't know why, but those words clung to him. 2025 is my year," he said quietly to his reflection, then louder, his voice filled with a conviction he hadn't felt in years. 2025 is my year. That single sentence hit him like a tidal wave of energy. For the first time, he felt a fire ignite deep inside his soul. He didn't know where this newfound path would lead, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not live another year as the same man. He made a decision that night. No more excuses. No more waiting for motivation to strike. No more settling for comfort. He grabbed a notebook, and on the very first page, he wrote just 3 words: "Stay hard, always." It was a promise to himself, a new creed to live by. The next morning, long before the sun even thought about rising, David was already running. His body screamed in protest. His lungs burned with every gasp of cold air, but he didn't stop. With every painful step, he wasn't just running, he was waging war against the old version of himself. Neighbors peeked out their windows, confused. Why was this man pushing himself so hard at 4 a.m.? But David didn't care what they thought. He was on a mission, singular and focused, to become the hardest man alive. That was the moment his real journey began. A journey not to impress others or seek validation, but to prove one simple, powerful truth to himself. Pain is temporary. Regret is forever. And as the first light of 2025 would one day break through the clouds, David Goggins would be ready to whisper again, with unshakable belief, "This is my year." If this story resonates with you, if you're ready to make a change, hit that subscribe button. Let's build our own strength together. Thanks for watching. The first morning of his new life began in silence. No blaring alarm. No motivational video shouting affirmations. Just David and the sharp, cold air of 4 a.m. The world was still wrapped in sleep, but he was awake and ready to suffer. He stepped outside, and the wind hit his face like a wall of ice. His legs felt stiff. His running shoes were old and worn, but for the first time in a long time, his mind was crystal clear. This wasn't about fitness anymore. This was war. A war against the weakness in his own mind. As he started to run, every single step felt like fire shooting up his legs. His knees ached, his lungs burned for air, and every fiber of his being begged him to stop. That familiar voice inside his head started its chant. "Go back home, it's too cold, it's way too early, nobody even cares if you do this." But David kept pushing forward. He whispered to himself, "Don't stop. Not this time." Each stride became a hard-fought battle, each breath a small but crucial victory, but cars would occasionally pass, the drivers inside staring at him like he was completely out of his mind. And you know what? Maybe he was. But David didn't care. The world had labeled him lazy, slow, broken, and for a long time he believed they were right. But that was yesterday. Today he was building someone new from the ground up. After a few grueling miles, he finally stopped, bending over, gasping for air. Pain was a blanket covering every part of his body. Sweat mixed with the freezing air on his skin. He could barely move. But deep down, a small smile formed. He had just won his first battle. Not against the unforgiving road, not against the bitter weather, but against himself. When he got back home, he looked in the same mirror from the night before. His reflection hadn't physically changed much, but something in his eyes was different. There was focus. There was purpose. He said quietly to his reflection, "One day at a time." Then, a little louder, with more conviction, "Stay hard." The days that followed were even harder. The soreness intensified, his feet bled. His mind relentlessly screamed, "This is too much, you can't keep this up." But every single time that voice of doubt appeared, he answered it with a simple, defiant line, "I'm not done yet." He stopped caring about comfort. He stopped waiting for a magical burst of motivation to strike. He started building raw, unshakable discipline. His friends called him crazy. Some of them laughed. Others, with good intentions, told him he needed to rest. But David knew they couldn't see what he saw. They couldn't feel the shift happening inside him. He wasn't chasing fame or social media followers. He was chasing his own freedom. At night, when everyone else was asleep, he would train again. Push-ups, pull-ups, more miles on the road until his body physically couldn't move another inch. He wasn't running from the pain anymore. He was running straight into it, because he learned that pain was his greatest teacher. And every single drop of sweat was proof that the old, weak David was dying. As the days bled into weeks, something powerful began to happen. His mind grew stronger, more resilient, and his body, inevitably, followed suit. Slowly but surely, the weak man he saw in the mirror began to fade, replaced by someone he was starting to recognize, someone he was proud of. David smiled again. Not because life had suddenly become easy, but because he finally understood a fundamental truth. You don't find strength. You create it. And this was only the beginning. For weeks, which stretched into months, David was a man possessed. He rose before the sun, a solitary figure in the pre-dawn quiet, and he pushed himself into the deep hours of the night, long after the world had gone to sleep. His body transformed, hardening with each rep, each mile. But the real battle, the true war, wasn't fought in the gym or on the pavement. It was waged in the 6 inches between his ears. The runs grew longer, the workouts more grueling. Life, in parallel, seemed to conspire against him, throwing its own punches. Bills mounted, a constant nagging pressure. His body was a symphony of aches, a perpetual reminder of his grueling regimen. Friends, once a source of support, became distant voices. They didn't get it. "He's obsessed," they'd whisper. "He's lost his mind." David heard the chatter, but it was just noise. He had a singular, all-consuming vision, to forge himself into the hardest man alive. Then came one particularly bitter morning. 20 miles in, the world a blur of cold asphalt and gray sky. His legs betrayed him. Without warning, they gave out. He crashed to the ground, the impact a dull, heavy thud that reverberated through his entire frame. A searing pain shot through his knees. His body, his loyal soldier, had mutinied. It refused to move. Lying there, staring up at the indifferent sky, the world felt eerily silent. For the first time in this relentless journey, the thought of quitting slithered into his mind. He lay on the cold, unforgiving ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps as sweat turned to ice on his skin. A quiet, seductive voice whispered in his heart, "You've done enough. It's okay to stop now. No one will blame you." It was the voice of comfort, of reason, of surrender. But then, another voice rose from the depths, louder, harsher, and infinitely more powerful. It wasn't the chipper voice of motivation or the hollow ring of pride. It was the voice of pain itself, raw and guttural. And it sneered, "You think this is suffering? You don't even know the meaning of the word." A chill, colder than the morning air, snaked down his spine. That voice lit a fire in the wreckage of his resolve. He began to move, dragging himself up inch by agonizing inch. His knees trembled, his legs felt like foreign objects, but his eyes blazed with a renewed, ferocious fire. He started with a walk, a painful shuffle. The shuffle became a jog. The jog, a run. Every single step was an explosion of pain, but with it came a strange sense of healing, of reforging. He roared into the empty road, a primal scream of defiance. "Is that all you've got?" His voice echoed, a challenge to the world, to himself, to the very concept of limits. In that moment, David wasn't just running, he was becoming. He was being reborn as something unbreakable. When he finally stumbled home, he collapsed onto the floor, utterly spent. His hands were raw, his legs shook uncontrollably, but a profound calm settled over his heart. A smile broke through the mask of pain. He whispered to the empty room, "The body gives up long before the mind, you just have to teach it who's really in charge." Later that night, he stood before the mirror. The reflection was no longer a stranger he despised. It was stronger, sharper, hungrier. The man who once hated what he saw now felt a flicker of respect. "This," he murmured, "is what becoming unbreakable looks like." From that day forward, his training evolved. It was no longer just a physical pursuit. It was a mental crucible. He ran without music, without any distractions, alone with his thoughts. He confronted every weakness, every fear, head-on. He learned that the more he embraced the suffering, the stronger he truly became. David Goggins now understood a fundamental truth. Comfort is the enemy of growth, but suffering is the architect of greatness. That moment of breaking wasn't his end. It was his beginning. The days of weakness were over. David was no longer the man who looked for motivation. He had become discipline itself. He woke up at 3:45 a.m. every day. No excuses, no comfort, no noise, just silence and purpose. While the world slept, he ran through the dark streets. No music, no phone, only the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the cold morning air. This wasn't about a quick fix. It was a complete rewiring of his soul. He wasn't just working out. He was forging a new identity from the ashes of his former self. People started to notice him, the man who never stopped. Rain, snow, pain, it didn't matter. David was always out there, running, pushing, fighting. He wasn't training for medals or for likes on social media. He was training for something far more valuable: self-respect. In the gym, whispers followed him. "Who is this guy? He never rests. He's like a machine." And in a way, they were right. He had become a machine, one built from pain and powered by an unbreakable will. But this was only one piece of the puzzle. Deep down, David knew this journey wasn't just for him. He wasn't doing it to show off. He was doing it to show others that they could do it too. He began recording his thoughts, his training, his suffering, not to brag, but to share his raw, unfiltered truth. With a rough voice filled with fire and honesty, he spoke directly to the camera. "You can be better. You can be stronger. You can change your life. But let me be clear, no one is coming to save you." His words hit like a shockwave. People who felt lost, broken, or lazy started to listen. They saw a man who had pulled himself up from nothing, who turned his pain into his greatest source of power. And slowly, his message began to spread like wildfire. From one video to the next, from one person to thousands, the world started waking up to his voice. His raw authenticity cut through the noise of empty motivational quotes. But David didn't slow down. He didn't rest on his newfound influence. He kept training harder than ever before. Pull-ups until his hands bled, runs until his shoes were torn apart, workouts until his vision blurred. Because to him, the real enemy wasn't the weight on the bar or the miles ahead. It was the comfort zone. He often said, "When you think you're done, you're only at 40% of your true capability." That became his rule, the 40% rule, and it changed everything. The man who once hated the person he saw in the mirror now inspired millions to face their own reflections. But inside, he still lived by a simple, grounding truth. Never forget who you were when you started. At night, when the lights were off and the world was quiet, David would sit alone and whisper to himself, "Stay humble, stay hard." He wasn't chasing success or fame. He was chasing the version of himself that refused to quit, the one he had to build from scratch. Because now he wasn't just running on the road, he was running toward greatness. And as the world watched, it became clear, David Goggins wasn't just a man anymore. He had become a movement. Even the most unbreakable minds encounter storms. For David Goggins, that storm was brewing once more. Months of relentless training had forged his body into a weapon stronger than it had ever been. But beneath the surface, something darker began to take root. A profound silence. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that shadowed him, even as he pounded the pavement for miles on end. His routine was unwavering. Wake up at 3:45 a.m., push beyond the threshold of pain, run like a finely tuned machine. Yet, this time felt different. His body was on autopilot, but his mind felt hollow, a vacant space where his fire used to burn. Every day blurred into the next, a monotonous cycle of running, training, sweating, and suffering. But when the world outside fell quiet at night, his inner world roared to life. The ghosts of his past returned, their whispers echoing in the darkness. "You're not good enough. You'll never escape what you were." He had spent years battling these demons, forcing them into submission, but they never truly vanished. They simply waited, lurking in the shadows, anticipating the moment he would finally slow down. One evening, after another grueling run, David sat alone, his gaze fixed on a blank wall. His body was a canvas of scars, his feet swollen, his hands calloused and torn. He had meticulously followed the formula for success, checking every box. So why did he still feel this gaping void inside? He murmured to himself, "Why do I still feel so empty?" In that moment of quiet desperation, the truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. Discipline had sculpted his body, but it was pain that had forged his purpose. And sometimes when the pain subsides, the fire that fuels you can begin to flicker and fade. He knew what he had to do. He had to go back into the crucible of darkness that had originally shaped him. He embarked on a brutal 48-hour challenge. No sleep, no rest, just a pure, unadulterated mental war. He ran, lifted, sweated, and hurt, pushing his body until it screamed for mercy. On the second night, his legs felt like lead, on the verge of buckling. His vision blurred, his mind fogged over. The storm raging within him had reached its violent peak. But David refused to stop. Gazing up at the ink-black sky, he unleashed a primal scream. "You can take my body, but you'll never take my soul." That roar wasn't just noise. It was a catharsis. It was every failure, every moment of pain, every lingering fear being violently expelled from his very being. He kept moving forward. Each agonizing step shattered another link in the chains that tried to drag him back to his past. Every breath he took was a testament to his resilience, a declaration that he was still alive and still fighting. When the sun finally crested the horizon, David stood there, his body trembling with exhaustion, but his spirit soaring with pride. He looked out as the city slowly stirred to life and whispered, "I faced the storm, and I won." He had learned a profound lesson that day. The real battle was never against an external force. It was, and always had been, an internal one. The greatest struggle we face isn't against the endless road, the crushing weight, or the judging world. It's against that insidious voice inside our own heads that begs us to quit. And David Goggins, he had silenced that voice once again. After the storm came peace, not because life got easier, but because he got stronger. David Goggins had faced his demons, and now, nothing could break him. The man who once feared pain, now looked for it. He knew the truth. Growth only lives on the other side of suffering. He started speaking more, not as a celebrity, not as a hero, but as a soldier who had survived the battlefield of life. When people asked how he kept going, his answer was always simple. You have to build calluses, not just on your hands, but on your mind. And that's exactly what he did. His mind became a fortress. No excuses could enter. No weakness could survive. Each morning, he still woke up before dawn. He still trained when no one watched. Because discipline was no longer something he did. It was who he was. People around the world started following him. Students, soldiers, athletes, workers, all began repeating his words. Stay hard. He wasn't just inspiring them to work out. He was teaching them to fight their own battles, the ones no one sees, the mental ones, the emotional ones, the silent ones. Every speech, every post, every story from him carried the same message. No one will save you. You must save yourself. He often said, when you feel weak, remember, you've already survived your worst days. So what's stopping you now? That message hit millions. People started to change. They woke up earlier, trained harder, and started believing in themselves again. David became a symbol, not of perfection but of persistence. He showed that pain doesn't destroy you, it shapes you. But even with all the fame and followers, David stayed the same man, alone in his thoughts, running through the darkness, chasing his limits. He never wanted comfort, only truth. He believed every human has two voices, one that says, rest, and another that says, rise. And he chose to listen to the second one, every single time. One night, while running under the city lights, he whispered to himself, you don't need to be the best. You just need to be unstoppable. Those words became his way of life. Because Goggins knew, it's not talent that wins, it's not luck. It's the mindset that refuses to quit, no matter how hard life gets. He had turned pain into power, fear into fuel, weakness into strength. And now his mission was clear, to make the world realize that every person has a beast inside them. They just have to wake it up. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that so many of us struggle with: how to stop procrastinating and finally get things done. If you've ever found yourself staring at a blank page, putting off that workout, or endlessly scrolling when you know you have a deadline, this video is for you. Trust me, you're not alone in this. The first step is to break the cycle of I'll do it later. One of the most effective methods is the 2-minute rule. The idea is simple. If a task takes less than 2 minutes to complete, do it immediately. Replying to that email? Do it now. Tidying up your desk? Just 2 minutes. This builds momentum and creates a sense of accomplishment, making it easier to tackle bigger tasks. It's about turning small wins into a big victory. Next, let's talk about those larger, more intimidating projects. The key here is to break them down. A huge goal like write a novel or learn a new language can feel overwhelming. Instead, break it into tiny, manageable steps. Instead of write a novel, your goal for today could be write 100 words or outline the first chapter. This makes the task less daunting and gives you a clear, achievable target for the day. Each small step you complete is progress, and that's what matters. Another powerful technique is to create a dedicated, distraction-free environment. Your brain associates certain places with certain activities. If you work from your bed, your brain gets mixed signals. Is it time to work or time to sleep? Set up a specific spot just for focused work. Put your phone in another room, turn off notifications, and let people around you know that you need some uninterrupted time. This physical boundary helps create a mental boundary, signaling to your brain that it's time to focus. Now, let's address the mental side of procrastination. Often we put things off not because we're lazy, but because we fear failure or perfectionism. We're so afraid of not doing it perfectly that we don't do it at all. The antidote to this is to embrace imperfection. Give yourself permission to do a bad first draft or a messy first attempt. The most important thing is to start. You can always edit, revise, and improve later. Remember, done is better than perfect. Finally, reward yourself. Your brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. If all you associate with a task is hard work, you'll naturally want to avoid it. So, create a reward system. After you finish a focused work session, allow yourself to watch an episode of your favorite show, enjoy a tasty snack, or go for a walk. This positive reinforcement trains your brain to associate completing tasks with a reward, making you more likely to get started next time. So to recap, use the 2-minute rule for small tasks, break down big projects, create a distraction-free zone, embrace imperfection, and reward your progress. These aren't magic tricks, but consistent habits that can truly transform your productivity and help you beat procrastination for good. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found these tips helpful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. What are your favorite tricks for beating procrastination? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one.